Hello everyone, and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video, I'll be showing you how to make these super cute bunny gloves. These are inspired by some new jeans videos, by some things I've seen on Pinterest, and a few other things I've seen lying around. This is a totally beginner level tutorial, and if it's something that you need a little bit of help with as we go, please feel free to reach out to me on Instagram or just leave a comment. Let's get right into the video. For your materials today, you will need about 300 grams of one color weight for yarn, 100 of another, a hook in between 5mm and 5.5, as well as the normal other things like stitch markers, a needle, and some scissors. Also, please check out my Instagram for the full free written pattern. For step 1, we're going to make a slip knot, and I'm going to treat this as if you've never made something like this before, so we're going to take it right from the top for a brand new beginner. To make a slip knot, you want to hold the tiny end in one hand like so, and then take the other hand into a loop, pulling it through itself. Please pause and rewind if you need to see that again. Once you have actually made your slip knot, you're going to insert your hook and pull on the short tail to tighten it on top. Just pull loosely, you don't want anything too tight or it'll be impossible to chain through. To make a chain, you're simply going to yarn over like I'm showing you here, so that way there's a piece of yarn over your hook. Turn your hook and then pull it directly through the loop already on it. That is the foundation for any piece unless you're making some sort of ring. You then want to chain the length around your hand, make sure it is the widest part that you're measuring. Once you finish, you should have a piece that looks like this. You want to lay it flat and make sure that it measures correctly up against your hand, as I'm doing here, and once you're done, you want to make a slip stitch into the first chain you made. So simply you want to pull apart the yarn a little bit like this, right in front of that knot, and that's where you're going to push your hook through to create your first slip stitch. You want to do so by making sure you go into the back of it so the entire piece lays flat, and then when you have both of these two loops on your hook, yarn over like you were to chain, and this time pull it through both loops. From there, you're just going to chain 2 more times, and this is how we're going to basically start every row from this point on. From here, we're going to make something called a double crochet. You want to add 1 into every chain. To make a double crochet, you start by yarning over and then inserting your hook through the hole. That part has to come first. Once you push your hook all the way through that first chain stitch, you'll have 3 loops on your hook. You'll yarn over and pull through, so that way we again have 3 loops, pull it through 2, and then pull it through 2 more. From here, this step is optional but highly recommended. You're going to want to add a bobby pin or a stitch marker into that stitch you just made. That will help us in a little bit when we are adding slip stitches to close the row, so you don't forget where you made your first double crochet. A stitch marker is easiest because you can close it up, but of course you can use any object like this with like a bobby pin or safety pin or anything that can just be shoved through. From there, we're going to continue back around with our double crochets, showing you one more time, you want to yarn over once, showing you one more time, you'll yarn over, insert your hook in, yarn over again and pull through, then just continue to pull through 2 and 2, yarning over first. And you're just going to continue that all the way around. Once you make it to the end, don't forget your last piece here. You want to have a number equal to the amount of chains that you made in the beginning. From there, you will basically make another slip stitch, this time into that same place where you put your stitch marker. So as you can see now, you basically have this about an inch size piece of double crochet. And what we want to do is make sure that it stays in that fully perfect circular fashion. So that's why it's important to go into the right piece. So what you're going to do from here is basically take your hook and insert it directly next to the stitch marker like so, pull it out of the way, and then do your slip stitch normally. You will chain 2 when you're done, and then is when you're going to want to make your next double crochet, so that way we can move the stitch marker. So pull it out first, in my opinion. You don't technically have to, but I'd recommend pulling it out first, then making sure you go into that same stitch. And then your double crochets are going to be the exact same, just make sure that you're going through the side and not the top of the stitch like this. Once you've gone through totally, you will pick your stitch marker right back up and put it right back into this piece here. Of course, like I said, if you've been crocheting for a while, you probably don't need this step, but for beginners, I think it is very helpful. So from there, you're just going to want to continue all the way around once more, doing 1 double crochet into every single stitch in the row. Again, it should be equal to the amount you had in the last. Once you finish that row, I'm going to show you this step one more time where you are going to slip stitch in and then make your chain 2. From here, you need to be doing this after every row, but I'm going to cut that part from the video so you're not watching me do the same step over and over again. What we'll be doing next is adding a new color stitch marker into each of these 4 points, so that way we can do something called a decrease stitch. And while I'll explain what that is in a minute, it's more important first to have everything where they need to be. Start by removing your last stitch marker, and you can start the row the way we have been, just making a double crochet and putting the stitch marker back. I'll be differentiating my colors here for your guys' sake, but you don't need to be doing any of the extra fancy stuff. So once you've added your first stitch marker, I'm going to be using the orange ones here to show where we'll be putting decrease stitches. And what a decrease stitch does is it tightens up the piece by making there be less stitches in the following row. So we're adding 4 on equal points like I'm showing you here, so that way as you move down from your hand to your wrist, it tightens up just a little bit, so it doesn't smush your arm at all, but it will keep it so it's a little bit more form-fitting and won't fall off. You should have 4 total, like I said before, and remember you can use anything you have. From there, I'm going to show you how to actually make a decrease stitch. So it may seem a little counterintuitive that I put the first stitch marker in the next stitch, but it was just kind of to show you guys where it needed to be. So what you're going to do for a decrease is begin to yarn over the same way you would. You are then going to insert it in like a double crochet, but before yarning over, push it through the following stitch. It'll sit on your hook like so. Then you will simply yarn over and pull through and finish it just like a normal double crochet. Basically what you just did was you put those 2 stitches in the last row together into one, so it'll be 1 less stitch. You're then going to double crochet until you reach the next stitch marker, so that'll be just a minute here, we'll fly through it, and I will show you the decrease one more time. So again, you're going to yarn over like you normally would, insert into the decreasing stitch, and then pull it through the next one before you yarn over. So go straight through so it sits like so, and then yarn over, pull through once, and then pull through a second time, and continue this all the way around your row. Like I said before, we're just going to simply close off the row the way we've been doing, and for step 16, we are going to add another double crochet and move our stitch marker. Before you do anything else, we are going to add in 4 more stitch markers so we can do another row of double crochet decreases. I have a lot of stitch markers lying around, that's why I'm not pulling them all out yet. I want to give you guys the proper visual, but you do not need to leave the ones from the last row in. You can take them out and reuse them, but I do think it looks a little bit better this way so you can physically see what I'm doing. After you have added in all 4, you want to go back around the exact same way you did in the last row, decreasing into the stitches that need them and doing normal double crochets into the others. To show you one last decrease, remember you want to go through both of the 2 stitches and then finish like a double crochet. For step 19, you are going to make double crochet rows round and round until it reaches about the middle of your forearm. Basically, you're just going to continue the same way that we've been doing it prior to these decrease rows. You can go back and rewind if you need to see them that way, but it is very simply just going to be double crochet all the way around, slip stitch close, and chain 2. For step 20, we're going to begin adding increase stitches so that way we can expand the piece to over your forearms. To add an increase, we're going to start by putting 2 of these stitch markers on the sides of the gloves. I'm using pink to differentiate. And you're going to double crochet all the way around until you reach one of those increase stitches. To make an increase, you're going to add 2 double crochets into 1 stitch. An increase is quite simply the opposite of the decrease, where you are adding 2 into 1 stitch, so that way you're expanding the amount of double crochets that you have in a row. Unlike the double crochet decreases, you don't have to do anything fancy, you're just adding 2 regular double crochets. Close off your row normally, and we're going to move on to 1 more row of our increasing stitches. Now this is the point where I do want to add, if you are a bit thick in the forearm department, you might want to do a couple more rows of increases and a couple less rows of the normal double crochets you did before. If you find that when you're slipping it on, it doesn't fit the same way, I would go back and undo a few rows and start adding the increases a bit sooner. That way it'll move all the way up and over your forearm without being uncomfortable or pulling apart too much. The next step will be to make the little stripes on the end of our gloves. you're going to start by making a color switch instead of a regular slip stitch in chain 2. To do so, you are simply going to make a regular slip stitch, but instead of pulling through with your normal yarn, pull out with your second color instead. You want to make sure that both of these yarn pieces are nice and tight so that way nothing is going to come undone. And then you would double crochet normally, however we're going to do something called a front post, back post, double crochet. We'll start with the front post double crochets, and we are just doing the regular double crochet pattern as we go, which is the yarning over, pulling through. That doesn't change. What changes here is the actual placement of the insertion. So what we're going to be doing is inserting the hook behind the stitch rather than through it. So you're basically going to wrap around the last double crochet you made like so, going behind it for the front post, and then pulling through like a regular double crochet. Then we're going to do it 2 times back to back to create the little ribbing pattern. So once again, go behind it like so, and then just make your double crochet like normal. This pulls the double crochet to the top, creating what's called a front post. We are then going to do the opposite for a back post, where you are going through the back of the stitch, like so, pushing it through, and now over the front of it. I don't particularly know why they named them backwards. I think it's just because of the placement of the stitch itself. So now these are called back posts because they look like they're behind the stitch. And again, you want to make 2 of them, and you're going 2 and 2 all the way around until you've reached the other part of your glove. Once you make it across, just slip stitch through like normal, but you can also do a color switch to make the stripes. So color switch through and then chain 2 times. What we're then going to do is repeat this step until you have 4 total rows, meaning 2 white rows and 2 blue rows. Once you get to the end of each row, make sure you slip and color switch and then chain twice. At the end of all of it, you will finish up like this, chain 1 here, and then make sure you cut both colors of your yarn. When you are pulling through the chain, pull through like so, and then tie it super tight, then weave in your ends however you see fit. I simply just take my hook and pull it behind all the stitches and then trim them when they get short. Don't forget to do that on both sides of the piece. You want to make your second glove now, and then we're going to make that little bunny decoration. So to do so, you're going to start with a slip knot, same way we made them before, and this time you're going to chain 4 total times. People usually get scared of a magic ring, so I'm going to be making a different thing instead called a chain ring. So you'll chain your 4, and what we're going to be doing is basically making a fake circle with this little chain by slip stitching into that first chain you just made. This is going to create a very small little hole, which is basically where your chain ring is going to be. After you slip stitch through both of those little loops, you're going to chain 2 times, and that where my finger is the actual chain ring itself. Into this ring is where we're going to add 12 total double crochets, basically just making them the same way you normally would, but trying to tuck in that little end piece if you can. It isn't too hard to tuck in ends, you simply just want to make sure you're double crocheting around them, so you just want to hold it up against the chain like I'm showing you, and basically go around the entire piece. And then like I said, you'll be doing 12 double crochets all the way around this part here. When you get to the end, you want to slip stitch into that first one that you made and chain 5 times. This little circle is going to be the head of the bunny. The chain 5 is going to be the foundation for the ears. We are not making the circle any bigger, so don't worry about chaining 2 for a new row. You're just chaining 5 to actually make the ear itself. The ear is going to be made out of something called a half double crochet. The foundation for it starts the same like this, where you are yarning over and pushing through. The difference is that instead of pulling through 2 and pulling through 2, you are simply going to yarn over like this and then pull through all 3 at once. You are going to be making all of these half double crochets into the chains that you just made. So it should be 4 total since you skipped that 5th stitch to turn your work around, if that makes sense. So you're making 4 total half double crochets until you get back to the actual head of the bunny, which is where you are going to make a slip stitch into the next stitch in the row. So simply go into this next little circle here that I'm pointing out and just make a normal slip stitch. You're going to do so one more time into the next stitch and then make another chain of 5. That's just how we're going to make the second ear. Once you've finished all those steps, you are going to chain 1 and cut the yarn with a nice long tail. This will need to actually sew it onto the glove itself. Pull it all the way through like this and then tighten it so you have a nice little knot, creating the perfect shape for your bunny head. You'll then want to grab your darning needle and thread that long tail straight through. We'll be using this to sew the head right onto the glove. If you have never sewn before, don't worry, we are not doing any crazy techniques here. We are quite literally just going to push it through the very tip of the glove, through the backside like so, and then right back through the front of it again. I'm smushing mine together here to kind of eliminate that little hole since we didn't use a magic ring, and we're just going to go in and out of the little head here until it's nice and secure and tight on the glove. You don't have to make these stitches look super pretty. Since it's all one color, you won't really notice them. It's more important that your bunny is nice and secure so that when you're wearing your gloves out in the wintertime, nothing gets pulled and falls off. When you're done, you're going to turn your glove around and create a little knot by pulling your darning needle through and then again through this little hole here. Once you're done, you can just tighten it off, weave in your ends with your hook, and make a little snip like so. We also want to add some eyes to the bunny, so I just cut a smaller piece of my blue yarn that I used before, but you can use any color that you'd like here. I just take my darning needle and create the little shape of an eye, going through the back of the glove first, and then in and over the bunny. Make sure you are not pulling very tight here, or the stitch will end up blending in and pulling too tight on the yarn. You want to do it nice and light so you can very clearly see where the eyes fall. Going through the back of the glove first is how you get the little yarn over in the front. It's basically the part of the stitch that would go over and over if you were doing a running stitch. Once you have your two eyes on, you can add a nose if you'd like, but I think it looks cute like this. I turn it to the back and begin to tie off my ends like so that way we can cut them and just weave them in normally once we've finished. Thank you all so much for watching today's video. You can follow me on Instagram, TikTok, and Depop to buy anything I make, see extra tutorials, or just any extra content. I also have a members option available for YouTube for some limited time patterns and things I'm just giving away on there. Other than that, thank you again, and I will see you next Sunday. Bye-bye!